Everybody, just to help everyone out a little bit with some CT scans, I'd like to talk a little bit, get everyone introduced, maybe answer a specific question that came up to help everyone along. So to begin with, let's talk about what you're looking at here with the CT scan. And basically these are transverse, so they are cross sections through these organs. Now on the top here, I've given you this as a guide. Okay, and what does this refer to? Well, these are the levels going through, as you can see, you're moving things as you go from superficial to deep, and this will be a left lateral view. This would be a right lateral view going from superficial to deep. And the key to this is this guide, this number 63 represents number 63 on the CT scan. So image 63 is reflected by approximately this area right here, 63 in this dashed line. So even if you go superficial to deep, these structures that you're going to see in this cross section represent to what you're going to see here at 63. 131 would represent 131, 275, etc. And the ones in between you can just figure out. So having said that, the most important thing about doing CT scans correctly is you have to know these schematics in order to navigate through the CT scan. You can't just kind of know them, you have to know them. And that means that when you went through these lessons, you did heart topography, the segmentations, or heart basics, or some review up here with the thoracic cavity. When you went into these and you studied or you answered the questions about what these are, before you even venture into the CT scans, you should know, you should have studied these and know what these are, because it'll make your life a lot easier. So when you look at this, you can think aorta, cranial vena cava, caudal vena cava, azygos, and these, as well as you know, you go through these layers superficial to deep, you know, the different lung lobes, etc. You have to know those to a level well enough that when you look back at this, you understand what these things are in the guide up here at the top. Now, let's begin with one of the questions that comes up, and I'll show you how to get started on this, and then I'll share with you a specific question. So let's start out with 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the key to a CT scan is you have to move. And there's a lot of important information on here, and I really recommend you read through here about how to do a CT scan, because it talks about it and where things are. But let's begin with 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now we are on section 156. So the first thing you have to do is find an anchor. So 156 is going to be what? It's going to be somewhere in this level right here. Okay, we're going to be about at that level. So having said that, we're going to see, what are you going to see at this level at 156? Well, you're going to see, we're going to look at our top here. We're going to remember these things. These are lungs, right? And as we start to go through from superficial to deep, you're going to see lungs. As you go down through the wings, you get rid of the lungs. You're going to see things like the heart. You're going to see aorta right up in here. You're going to see lungs on the other side, etc. And this is a left lateral view. So that would represent the left side of the CT scan, which is over here on the left. And the text below told you that. You also have on here the right side. So you can go through right from superficial to deep. And that's to help you visualize where these structures, again, lungs on the outside. So out here on the right side would be lungs. But we're the same level, about 156, cranial screen right. You're going to be through the heart. So let's start off with the question of what is 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you got to start in the big picture. And let's go back to our left lateral view and we get rid of the lungs. So these obviously are going to be lungs here as we're working our way superficial to deep and we're looking above. But what is this big structure right here that we're dealing with? Well, you're dealing with the heart. So first off, you have to say, okay, that's got to be parts of the heart. And this implements, so why are you doing CT scans? Well, it implements all of your spatial 3D anatomy. I'm not trying to create radiologists out of everybody. What I frequently hear is, well, we don't do CT scans in my clinic, or we'll never use CT scans. Well, number one, that may be true for you in your clinic, but every semester I've taught this course for the past 15 years, I get 2 or 3 students who work at specialist radiology clinics, and this has really helped them. But more than, as I'm not setting you up to be radiologists, what I'm using CT scans to help you understand the 3-dimensional anatomy. And they're actually very fun once you get used to doing them. They're a little intimidating at first, but let's go back to what are 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have discerned that this is in the heart, and now you got to start using all of your knowledge. So what chambers, these are obviously going to be chambers of the heart. So what chambers are ventral in the heart? Well, 1 and 2 are probably going to be ventricles, because if you remember, and this can come from various levels, but if you go through and you expose the chambers of the heart, and you did this, You studied these things and you learned that this was the left ventricle, this is the right ventricle. The yellow one is the left atrium, okay? And then from a right view, you can go through it. Right ventricle is dorsal, or right atrium is dorsal, the right ventricle is ventral, and the left ventricle is a little bit caudal to the right ventricle. But you put all these things together. So if I'm looking again at the left lateral view here of the heart, we're going to sit there and say 156, the line is about right here. So what chamber am I going to see on this very left side here that would represent number 1? Well, it's going to be the left ventricle. Okay, so that's your rock. So now you know you have the left ventricle. What exists above that left ventricle? Well, it's going to be the left atrium. So number 1 is going to be the left ventricle. Number 3 will be the left atrium. And then you can go from there and you can start to reason other things out. Well, if 1 is the left ventricle, what is 2 going to be? Well, 2 has to be, right? 2 has to be, if we're at 156, and again, that's about right here, 2 has to be basically the right ventricle. And then 4 would be the right atrium. So that's how you get going. And then the other key that's critically important is once you identify these things, make sure they move. Make sure you move and go back and forth. So let's take number 7 here, for example. Number 7 is this huge thing right in the middle of the heart, all right? And you see it, and I follow it, I'm moving through the CT scan, and where does it empty into? It empties into number 1. So what very large vessel, and again, we can follow it back here, number 7, what very large vessel exits the left ventricle? And again, you have to go back to some of your work you did here, where you can go, what is a large vessel that comes up from the left ventricle? And we can follow it here, number 7. This exits the left ventricle, and then it comes up. I'm moving cranially, and it links up right here with this curve. Boy, what would that be? I'm suspicious this thing right here, this large vessel. And then we can follow this part from the curve as we go caudally, and we go caudally, and then you see number 9. So now we have 7 and 9 are here and here. 9 is on the left side. You look up at this again, and we're at 131. It has to be this large vessel up here. And you know from your studying your schematics that this large thing is what? It's the aorta, specifically the descending aorta. So you get your anchors like the chambers of the heart. Then you look at the other critical thing you look at is what connects to what. Okay, now let's look at a couple tougher ones. Some people have asked some questions, and let's go with number 49 and 50. Okay, unknowns number 49 and 50 on section 60, and let's reason through how we'll do these. Now these are a lot harder. So, but let's talk about how to do it. So let's start with 49. So obviously these are going to be vessels. So we're talking about 60. So we're talking at this level. So let's start back here. We're talking at a level that's up in here. And we're talking about large arteries that are filled with contrast medium. Okay, so if we're looking at 49, what do we know about going through and seeing the exposure of these vessels? Well, again, you need to have gone back and done a review on these so you know what these arteries are. What are these arteries here? And unless you've studied that, you'll still be lost when you do the CT scan. So I'm looking at a large artery here and here, and I'm looking at a lot of other arteries. So let's look at what we know. We're interested in 49 and 50. So 50, we can see this artery coming off here. If I move a little bit caudally, two arteries come off of both 49 and 50, and they both head ventrally, and then they head caudally along the ventral abdomen. And you might have already answered these in their 40 and 41. So if I look up here, what arteries in this region of 63 are coming off of an artery and they head down ventrally? Well, right here are the internal thoracic arteries. So this tells me these are the internal thoracic arteries, 40 and 41, the left internal thoracic and the right internal thoracic. And if I follow those back, it's going to come up and it's going to join this big artery right up in here. Well, what artery does the internal thoracic come up and join? What is this artery right here? Well, this one would be what? The left subclavian, and this would be the right subclavian. All right. And then you can see all the other branches of the subclavians coming off of there. So again, you have to move, you have to look at what things connect. And then this subclavian, now I'm going to go cranially now. Let's look at these arteries, and they split into all these arteries. Okay. And some arteries come off. Well, what happens to the subclavian? Well, after all these branches come off, these 4 branches, and again, that's back in the lesson, it goes into the limb as what? It goes into the limb as the brachial. So all these are coming off and it goes off. After that last branch, the craniocervical and the internal thoracic comes off, the artery heads up as the brachial, and then it heads into the limb, okay? And once it heads into the limb, it keeps going and some branches come off, and then it heads into the arm, and then it becomes the brachial. And that makes sense because this is the brachial artery. I'm sorry, and that makes sense because this is the brachial. Now, here's our friend number 60. What is number 60? And we're up here at 15. So here again, you have to move. So it looks like it could be a number of things. So let's follow where this goes, and I'm going to keep my stylus on it. So we don't know for sure what it is because the arteries have the contrast medium, the veins don't yet because it hasn't, contrast medium hasn't been enough, but we're going to follow this caudally, following caudally, and it joins together. Look at that. It just joined together with this other structure over here from the other side. So this is animal left, this is screen left. So it joins together and it comes up and, oh, join this great big thing, number 42. What is that big vessel? Well, number 42 is a large vessel. Let's see, if we were to look, and it looks like it's headed, I'm going caudally, large vessel here, and it's heading right into the heart. And it becomes a part of that part that we called, what do we call this earlier? It's kind of mixing around in here, but what do we call the part up in here? Headed into the right atrium. So what is that part that heads into the right atrium from that large vessel? What is this vessel going to be? Well, we can look up here and we can see it right here, or we can look on the right side and go through and bear things. What is that large unpaired vessel that comes into the right atrium? That would be the cranial vena cava. Okay, so that structure way back up in number 15 would be the external jugular vein. Two external jugular veins up in the neck come together and they form the vena cava. I hope this helps you out a little bit. And you can see here's your key down here. I hope this helps out a little bit. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate.